Hello and welcome to the podcast of the Prison Officers Association, the UK's largest professional union for prison, correctional and secure psychiatric workers with over 30,000 members. Listeners, this episode of the POA podcast is going to concentrate on the union's work on behalf of its members with disabilities. And I'm just going to go around the room, as it were, and ask people to introduce who they are, what their role is in the union, and what their role is in the union's work on disabilities. So perhaps, Joe, you could start.
Joe Simpson, Deputy General Secretary of the POA. I'm also the chair of the Equality section for the POA, and I cover a lot of work right across the equality sector. We do a little bit of disability right across, especially when we're talking to the department about new policies that are coming in and the equality impact assessment that they do. Work on disabilities is just continue, and just as the law changes and then we see what's happening in the workplace, it can be just reacting to different stuff.
I'm Jackie Marston, I'm with the NEC and a member of the equality team for the POA. And I think Joe's more or less covered everything that we do, really, dealing with equality issues. And I particularly deal with issues for women.
Jeff Willits, NEC, POA. I'm part of the equality team, and I think Joe and Jackie have both covered what we do.
I mean, before we go any further, it's probably useful to just work out what definition of disability are we using here. The standard definition is if you have a condition or some issue that has lasted for 12 months or more that prevents you taking part in normal life, impairs the functions that are needed for normal life. That's the definition of disability. Is that the same with the employers that the POA deals with?
I think sometimes the employer doesn't understand the definition of disability, especially when we're talking to them about different issues. And I'm not talking about the people who come on the equalities team, obviously, or on the equalities weekly, because they do know. But I'm talking about individual governors. Now, individual governors have got a hard job to do because they're supposed to be the font of all knowledge, and they'll never be able to do that. But sometimes I think they are badly advised by HRBPs who don't even know their own policies at times. So the definition that the union uses is exactly that.
Right.
And sometimes we need to go in and get an agreement for somebody who's fit enough to come back to work, but not to do the full range of duties, but would need a little bit more time. And we also use the term disability when we are in a formal absence review meeting where somebody could be dismissed or accept a downgrade, where usually if it's an injury at work, then we class that for the employer as a disability to get the 2 years pay protection.
Yeah. Okay, so, I mean, the law says that reasonable adjustments must be made for people who have disabilities to enable them to continue at work. But the get-out is that if the adjustments are held to be unreasonable, then the employers don't have to do anything. And that can mean that the person either continues to suffer at work or ultimately is deemed to be not able to do their job and can be dismissed. To what extent is that sort of mindset, that saying, well, you might want this adjustment, but we don't think it's reasonable, therefore we're not going to do it. To what extent is that a problem in the prison service? And how's the POA challenging that?
We need to remember that there's only an employment tribunal that can declare if somebody's disabled or not, or that the occupational health will put on their reports it's likely to come under the Equality Act. And it's if it's lasted over 12 months or is likely to last over 12 months. So they do have the policy in place where if somebody is likely to fall under the Equality Act, where they can have the 2 year pay protection and the regrade, and any time during that 2 years, if they get fit and well again, then they can go back to the original grade on their original terms and conditions. The problem I come across a lot with that is the governor doesn't understand that. And I've certainly dealt with two cases. One where I had an officer that went to occupational health because he'd got a back problem. Occupational health said that he should work in an establishment nearby that's only got 2 levels rather than the 4 that was at his prison. The governor wouldn't allow a transfer there, so the officer had to resign and then rejoin again. at the other establishment, which is just a complete and utter waste of taxpayers' money. Another one that I dealt with, he was a senior officer and he took a regrade. When he was fit and well again, they said there was no place for him back as a senior officer. So he'd have to go back at a lower grade. And that went on for months, battling with pay section and everybody else, because the governor didn't understand what the policy was. And we eventually got him back to his senior officer grade, where it should have been. But like Joe says, there's a lot of individual governors, they just do not understand at all.
You'd think that that's a problem that can be sorted out centrally, but I guess the union is making progress on the issue by defending and representing members who are being unfairly treated in this situation, whereas actually the problem should be resolved by the centre saying to governors, look, this is what you need to know, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do. Jeff, I wonder what are the other sorts of problems that members with disabilities face working in the prison service?
I think Jackie and obviously Joe's touched on the fact that governors don't want to use discretion. I don't know if there's a lack of understanding of the policy or the fact that they don't want to use it. That becomes a considerable amount of concern for us, especially with the amount of disability range. Recently, we've had COVID. We've had a lot of members that have had long COVID issues. We've got other members that have got medical conditions that have not been put into a box or recorded, so therefore governors will not go out and make a decision on them, and this is really hard for our members.
The importance of this in the union's work, I'm sure, is mirrored in other unions as well. I know recently we've had the TUC Disabled Workers Conference. What's the value to the POA of those sort of events?
I think the value of anything when you get unions together is to basically look at what they're doing, any successes that they've had in the workplace. But I think primarily for us is when you seem to be, when you're not with other trade unions and you're just dealing with your own members, sometimes you feel this is only happening to us, and it isn't. When you get to a conference, you see how it's happening right across the workplaces in the country. And the value of it is to listen and to question other trade unions on how they overcame a lot of things, which for us, we thought we were the only union that was having real problems with reasonable adjustments. When we got the disability conference, we weren't. We weren't the only trade union. So it's rife across the different work areas in the country. And I think it's valuable for not just the National Executive Committee, it's also valuable for members from the field who are on branch committees who are dealing with equality issues in the workplace to actually see that and think, oh, so it's not just us, but now I know how to deal with that, so I'll go back and do that. But also at the conference, I mean, it wasn't this year, but when you actually go to the conference, there's stalls outside with different people, with different pamphlets, leaflets, solicitors, and things like that on how to deal with different things. And sometimes that comes in real handy as well. And also, the TUC have their own stand, which they have their own products, which our members can go on the TUC website and download for free. So there's quite a vast amount of information out there. It's just actually getting it.
To what extent, though, I wonder, is the working environment one of the key arguments that the employer, either at governor level or at government department level, is citing? Are they just saying, listen, this is a prison, therefore that sort of adjustment is not possible? Is that an argument that the union hears a lot of?
I think some governors, they have to have it really pointed out to them and they have to go higher for advice and that. I'm not saying we haven't had people who've been disabled who have been wrongly dismissed, because they have. You know, there's certainly the lack of understanding there. But, you know, as a union, I think we do put some good cases forward and we do win some good cases. And, you know, and we do work hard for the membership in things like this. Like Joe says at the conference, you do think it's only you. I moved the motion at the conference on reasonable adjustments. And being operational civil servants, we are a bit different. than normal civil servants, because the majority, I'm not saying all of them, but the majority of civil servants, I think, work at a desk job. So they could have things wrong with them, or disabilities or injuries or other illnesses that they could actually go to work with. We can't. I say fair play to the PCS. I've been in meetings at times where they've stuck up for our members, saying it's different for prison officers because of the work that we do. But unfortunately, whilst we're willing to, with the civil service like that, I think we'll be treated the same. And, it's one of them things that we have a battle on, really.
I think one of the problems that we do face, as Jackie said, as a frontline uniformed staff, is in order to be a prison officer grade, you have to do CNR. And if you can't do CNR, you can't be prison officer grade. It's as simple as that. So if that disability then doesn't allow them to be able to do CNR, then that's where we get a problem, because there is no reasonable adjustment to put staff anywhere as a frontline member of staff. And that is one of the hurdles that we have. The other one is the fitness test. If you can't do the fitness test because you have a disability, they've got a different way of you doing it, but you still need to pass it. And I think the fitness test is one of the most divisive things I've ever come across. And the reason why I say that is, you join the prison service as a prison officer, and you have to do the fitness test, and you have to do CNR. As a Band 4 / senior officer, you have to do the fitness test and you have to do CNR. As a Band 5 prison officer, you have to do the fitness test and you have to do CNR. Once you become an operational governor, you don't have to do fitness test and you don't have to do CNR. And that's the anomaly within it. And I believe that is wrong, fundamentally wrong. The word that we've got to get around is operationally. And that means you have got to be able to do a frontline member of staff's job. Whether you be an officer, Band 4, custodial manager, PO, whether you're a governor or anybody, if you're on the front line, you have to do exactly the same duties, because you can be called upon at any time to do CNR as an operational frontline member of staff. And that is where it falls down with the prison service, because they continually use that for reasonable adjustments. And the other thing that they do is occupational health. I think our members, and we have pointed this out to prison service, our members have got no faith or trust in the occupational health system, because the only time, majority of the time, that our members come in contact with occupational health is when the employer is trying to dismiss them, either through ill health retirement or medical inefficiency. And once you've destroyed that, then people mistrust it and they don't get a service from it when they're supposed to. And the service only uses occupational health at the end of the process instead of using it at the beginning. What can I do to get this member of staff back? Do I need to get this member of staff to go to physio? Do I need them to start going to a pain clinic? Do I need them to go and do this, that, the other? How do I get them back to work? And it appears to us as a trade union is how do I get them out of work rather than try and keep them in? And I think the prison service are the sore losers for that, because they do lose quite a few experienced staff through it.
If we look to the following 6-12 months, what do you think the priority areas are? I mean, we've spoken about the need to reform the OHS, which is obviously an ongoing campaign, the problems that the union's having about getting management to understand the nature and the debilitating nature of long COVID. But what are, if you had to pick what kind of one issue in this area that would be the priority over, say, the next 6-12 months, what would it be, Jeff?
It's quite a few, really. I think one of the biggest things is probably getting governors to understand, like Sir Joe said, the occupational health and the advice. There's a service there to advise them. And even when they've got that advice, it's taking it on board and having the education to do something with it, to know about disability, to know about equalities. And I think sometimes it's not used to its best of ability. I mean, take some of our members over COVID times that clinically extremely vulnerable. Some of them were working from home. And then all of a sudden, with a reasonable adjustment, was for them to work from home. But that was a battle to get people to work from home when they had clinically extremely vulnerable to this COVID virus. So I think there's some big concerns, and the concerns are if you're operational and you can't do your duties, therefore you are either farmed or you're looking at coming out HMPPS due to the fact that you can't do your job. But if you're non-operational, there's more and more non-operational working from home as a reasonable adjustment.
Thank you. Jackie, what would you say?
Training for governors is essential because there's far more that don't know than there is that do know. We have a lot of governors as well who think they're doctors, who think they know better than Occy health reports and things. But there is another thing as well. I mean, blood thinners. There are lots of people on blood thinners. But if you're on blood thinners for life, you can't be an operational prison officer. You've got an immediate medical retirement. I don't know any other jobs where that would be the case. But even, when we come across cases like that, governors don't want to give the medical retirement. They're trying to do medical inefficiency. And we are battling all the time to say, no, it is medical retirement. It was agreed that it was medical retirement because they can never work as a prison officer again if they're on it for life, because the department won't take the chance of somebody being cut or assaulted and bleeding out. But training for governors is essential, and dealing with governors that deliberately don't follow the policy is also essential.
Yeah.
Senior management need to deal with them.
Thanks, Jackie. And Joe, what would your priority issue be for the coming period?
My priority issue for the next 6 to 12 months is the after effects of COVID, both mentally and physically on our members. That's going to be massive coming up. When COVID came in, nobody knew what the effects were going to be. And I think over the next 6 to 12 months, I think it's going to have a big effect on our members' workplace and their mental health and well-being. And the employer needs to understand that rather than try and bury their heads in it. So that's one of the priorities that we'll be looking at as an equalities team over the next 6 to 12 months.
Well, I think that's a very hefty workload, and if there's any progress on any or all of those issues, it will be of real benefit to the union's members for sure. I'm wondering if members are listening to this and they're not sure if they meet the criteria of being a worker with a disability, what should they do?
Refer themselves to occupational health. Go and see a member of occupational health, ask them, tell them what you're living with, tell them what your symptoms are, tell them how long you've had it. And then they will say whether it's likely or unlikely to fall under the Equality Act.
I see. And if members who know that they have a disability, are living with them, working with a disability at the moment, want to get more involved in the POA's work in this area, what should they do about that?
Should email us, because one of the best things that we ever had was the Disability Champions Network, which came in, and unfortunately it's fell by the wayside. And I think the trade union movement needs to look at that. And then once we've got that, same as health and safety reps and also the equality reps, I think the disability champions are a big miss in the workplace, and we need to get back to that. And we need to start looking towards the trade union movement on how they put courses on, look at other trade unions and say, what do you teach your members on disability? And what do you teach your reps in order to get through it? Because I think sometimes it can be a little bit daunting for members. And I deal with the pensions for the whole of the service. And I've heard some heart-rending stories from our members coming through. And there's a lot the service don't do. And especially around cancer, where they could do a lot to allay our members' fears, because obviously as soon as people hear that word, they immediately think the worst. And the last thing that they want on their minds is their loss of their employment. And I think the service needs to get its head around that as well.
You invited people who wanted to get more involved to email in. Joe, what email address should they use?
If they put carol@puauk.org.uk and just put it for the attention of the Equality Whitley team, and then we will sit down and look at it and contact the member and ask them what they want to do, how they're going to assist the members in the field. Because they don't have to be on the committee, but they need to be a POA member.
For sure.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed. Any final thoughts before we go our separate ways on this podcast?
Decisions on how members of staff are dealt with very much come down to individual governors. And some governors, we have to say, are exceptional and will support staff for as much as they can and will support them all the way through. Unfortunately, not all governors are like that. And, we've got some maverick governors who will just go off and do their own thing. And that's when we think the department should deal with them governors. And we've been asking for it a long time, but they don't. Joe,
last word to you.
Yeah, it's a whole union problem. It's not just an NEC problem. It's not just a branch officials problem. It's a whole union problem. And it's a members problem. And the only way that we're going to win anything is together. And we need to be together on this in order to make change.
Thank you all very much indeed. My thanks to Jackie, Jeff and Joe. The message is clear. The union is working hard to make sure it is truly inclusive for all members and potential members, irrespective of disability, gender, race or sexual orientation. It is also taking steps to make POA representatives and local committees more reflective of the makeup of the union's membership. And in future episodes, we will be focusing on the work being done in respect of the other equality strands. Truly, the union is only as strong as its members, and the more members the union has, and the more diverse and inclusive the membership is, the louder and stronger the union's voice. So if you're listening to this and haven't signed up, speak to your local POA rep or head over to poauk.org.uk to find out how to join and all the information you need about the union and the work it does on inclusivity and everything else. Thank you for listening. We hope you like what you've heard and will join us for the next episode of the POA podcast. Thanks and goodbye.